On August 14, 2025, Rebecca Haro called 911 with a story that would tear apart a Southern California community. Her 7-month-old baby, Emmanuel, had been violently stolen from her arms by a stranger in a parking lot. She begged for help, sobbing into the phone. But here is what investigators discovered. Baby Emmanuel may have been dead for days before that frantic call was ever made. So why did his mother fabricate an elaborate kidnapping story? And how did a system meant to protect children fail so catastrophically that it may have cost Emmanuel his life? Tonight, we're diving deep into the Emmanuel Haro case, a story of deception, abuse, and the tragic consequences when warning signs are ignored. This isn't just about a missing child. This is about a cover-up that shocked investigators and left a community questioning everything they thought they knew about the family next door. But before we dive into this incredible real case, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if stories like this keep you up at night, make sure to hit that subscribe button to know upcoming true crime story. So, let's begin. August 14, 2025. The temperature in Yucaipa, California was climbing toward 105 degrees when Rebecca Haro made the call that would change everything. At 2:47 p.m., dispatchers received what seemed like every parent's worst nightmare. Rebecca claimed she was changing Emmanuel's diaper in her car outside Big 5 Sporting Goods when an unknown attacker struck. According to her story, this stranger assaulted her and snatched her 7-month-old baby before disappearing into thin air. The response was immediate and massive. Police flooded the shopping center. Helicopters searched from above. K-9 units scoured nearby areas. Within hours, Emmanuel's photo was everywhere. Social media, local news, missing person flyers. The tight-knit desert community rallied together, desperate to bring home this innocent child. But as the search intensified, investigators began noticing troubling inconsistencies. Here is the first red flag that should make you pause. If a baby was really kidnapped in broad daylight from a busy parking lot, why wasn't there an Amber Alert? The answer exposes the first major crack in Rebecca's story. To issue an Amber Alert, law enforcement needs specific details, a suspect description, a vehicle make and model, a license plate number. These alerts are only effective when the public knows what to look for. Rebecca couldn't provide any of these crucial details. Her attacker was supposedly a faceless stranger who appeared and vanished like a ghost. No witnesses saw the alleged assault. No surveillance cameras captured the kidnapping. No one remembered seeing a suspicious person or vehicle fleeing the scene. For investigators, this wasn't just unusual, it was virtually impossible. Big 5 Sporting Goods sits in a busy commercial area with multiple stores, restaurants, and constant foot traffic. How does someone violently assault a mother and steal her baby without a single person noticing? The community was asking the same questions. Online forums buzzed with speculation. Why no Amber Alert? Why were the details so vague? Some residents began voicing what many were thinking but were afraid to say. Something about this story didn't add up. As detectives dug deeper, Rebecca's account began falling apart piece by piece. Her injuries didn't match someone who had been violently attacked. The timeline of events kept shifting. Small details changed with each retelling. When investigators pressed Rebecca for more specific information about her attacker, she became evasive. She claimed memory problems from the trauma. But experienced detectives know the difference between genuine trauma responses and someone scrambling to keep a full story straight. The breaking point came during a formal interview at the station. When confronted directly about the inconsistencies in her story, Rebecca abruptly ended the interview and requested a lawyer. For investigators, this was a pivotal moment. Innocent parents of missing children don't typically lawyer up when police are trying to find their baby. Think about that for a moment. Your child is missing, possibly in the hands of dangerous strangers, and police want to ask follow-up questions to help find them. Would you stop cooperating? Would you walk out of that interview? By the second week of August, the investigation had completely shifted focus. Instead of searching for unknown kidnappers, detectives were examining the Haro family themselves. Search warrants were executed at their modest home in Cabazon, transforming what neighbors described as an ordinary family residence into a crime scene. Investigators seized computers, cell phones, vehicles, anything that might contain digital evidence about Emmanuel's true fate. They were looking for GPS data, text messages, internet searches, and call logs that could piece together what really happened to this 7-month-old baby. The seizure of evidence sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. Families who had dropped off casseroles and offered support suddenly found themselves wondering if they had been deceived. Had they been searching for a child who was already dead? Had they been comforting parents who were actually responsible for their son's disappearance? As word spread about the search warrants, the community's sympathy began transforming into suspicion and anger. August 22, 2025. 8 days after the initial missing child report, Riverside County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the Haro home with arrest warrants. Both Rebecca and Jake Haro were taken into custody on suspicion of murder. The community was stunned. The parents who had pleaded for help finding their missing baby were now being led away in handcuffs. Social media exploded with disbelief, anger, and demands for answers. But the arrests were just the beginning. What investigators revealed next would prove even more shocking than anyone had imagined. As news of the arrest spread, attention turned to Jake Haro's criminal background, a history that revealed disturbing patterns of violence that should have prevented this tragedy. In 2018, Jake was convicted of child abuse in Riverside County. This wasn't a minor offense or a misunderstanding. This was a formal conviction for harming a child. Not Emmanuel, but another child who had been in his care. Let me ask you this. If someone has been convicted of child abuse, should they be allowed unsupervised access to an infant? Should the system have been monitoring this family more closely? More recently, in February 2024, Jake was arrested on weapons charges for unlawfully possessing a firearm. At the time of Emmanuel's disappearance, this case was still working its way through the courts. So Jake Haro was a convicted child abuser with pending weapons charges who had unrestricted access to a 7-month-old baby. The district attorney would later call this a catastrophic failure of the system. In their view, Jake should have been behind bars, not free to potentially harm another child. They argued that proper handling of his 2018 conviction could have prevented Emmanuel's death entirely. August 27, 2025. District Attorney Mike Hestron held a press conference that would reframe everything the public thought they knew about this case. The bombshell: Emmanuel had likely been dead for days before Rebecca ever called 911. The kidnapping story was an elaborate cover-up designed to hide what prosecutors believe was the result of prolonged, severe child abuse. According to prosecutors, Emmanuel died from injuries sustained over time, not from a sudden attack by strangers, but from systematic abuse within his own home. The very people who should have protected him were allegedly responsible for his death. Court documents would later reveal that investigators believe Emmanuel died between August 5th and August 14th, meaning he could have been deceased for over a week before his mother reported him kidnapped. Think about the implications of this timeline. For potentially 9 days, Rebecca and Jake went about their daily routines while Emmanuel's body was hidden somewhere. They may have attended family gatherings, gone shopping, interacted with neighbors, all while knowing their son was dead, and planning to stage an elaborate kidnapping story. August 24, 2025. 2 days after the arrests, the search for Emmanuel took a grim turn. Law enforcement teams conducted an extensive operation along State Route 60. Near Gilman Springs Road in Moreno Valley, a remote area of scrubland, where evidence could easily be concealed. Cadaver dogs worked methodically across the terrain while investigators used metal detectors and other specialized equipment. In a surreal scene that felt torn from a crime drama, Jake Haro, wearing jail clothing and in custody, was brought to the search site. To assist investigators, the fact that Jake was present at this search told the community everything they needed to know. This wasn't about finding a kidnapped child anymore. This was about recovering a body, and they believed Jake knew where it was. Despite the intensive search involving multiple agencies and specialized teams, Emmanuel's remains were not found that day. The search concluded without the discovery everyone hoped for, leaving investigators and the community with more questions than answers. As of today, Emmanuel's body has still not been recovered. This absence haunts every aspect of the case and adds another layer of tragedy for a community desperate for closure. The Emmanuel Haro case exposes critical failures in how our child protection system operates. Multiple warning signs were present, yet no one intervened to protect this vulnerable infant. Jake's 2018 child abuse conviction should have been a permanent red flag. Instead, he was apparently allowed to have contact with Emmanuel without adequate supervision or monitoring. His pending weapons charge in 2024 should have escalated concerns about domestic violence and child safety. Child Protective Services has not publicly explained their involvement, if any, with the Haro family prior to Emmanuel's death. Were there previous reports of abuse? Were welfare checks conducted? Did anyone in the system recognize that a convicted child abuser with pending criminal charges posed a danger to an infant? These questions matter because they point to systemic problems that extend far beyond this single case. Other children are living with adults who have histories of violence. How many warning signs are being ignored or inadequately addressed? The Riverside County District Attorney was blunt in their assessment. This tragedy could have been prevented if the system had functioned properly. That's a damning indictment of multiple agencies and institutions that are supposed to protect children. On the evening of August 22nd, as news of the arrest spread, nearly 100 community members gathered for a vigil outside the Haro family home in Cabazon. They brought candles, stuffed animals, flowers, and signs demanding justice for Emmanuel. Local residents who had joined search efforts felt betrayed and manipulated. They had spent days combing through ditches, posting flyers, and organizing volunteer groups to find a child who may have already been dead. Their genuine concern had been exploited to cover up what prosecutors allege was murder. One community member captured the collective anguish. "I'm a mother and a grandmother. This has been emotional. I've been having trouble sleeping, just trying to keep up with updates. When I heard about the arrests, I was shaking. I had goosebumps because I had a feeling something wasn't right." The Uvalde Foundation for Kids, moved by the tragedy, organized a nationwide moment of silence to 110 minutes of quiet reflection, 1 minute for each day of Emmanuel's short life. This gesture served as both tribute and protest, ensuring that Emmanuel would be remembered even as the investigation continued. August 29, 2025. Formal charges were filed against both Rebecca and Jake Haro. They were indicted on first-degree murder charges and accused of filing false police reports. Even though Emmanuel's body had not been recovered, the decision to file murder charges without a body is significant. It indicates that prosecutors believe they have overwhelming evidence of Emmanuel's death and the parents' responsibility for it. Digital evidence, witness testimony, forensic analysis, and the timeline of events must have painted a compelling picture of guilt. Court documents revealed additional details about the timeline. Emmanuel was likely killed between August 5th and August 14th. With the kidnapping story fabricated after his death to cover up the crime. This means Rebecca and Jake had over a week to plan their deception, craft their story, and dispose of evidence. The charges also included filing a false police report, acknowledging that the entire kidnapping narrative was a fabrication designed to mislead investigators and waste public resources. Despite the arrests and charges, critical questions remain unanswered. Where is Emmanuel's body? Prosecutors claim to have a strong indication of its location, but searches have been unsuccessful. Without recovering Emmanuel, there can be no complete closure for the community or full justice for this innocent child. What exactly happened to Emmanuel? While prosecutors allege prolonged abuse leading to death, the specific circumstances of how he died may never be fully known without additional evidence or confessions. Were there other victims? Jake's 2018 child abuse conviction involved another child. How many children may have been harmed by someone who should never have had access to them? Could this have been prevented? This question haunts everyone involved in the case. If the system had properly monitored Jake after his conviction, if red flags had been taken seriously, if intervention had occurred earlier, would Emmanuel still be alive? The Emmanuel Haro case isn't just about one family's tragedy. It's a mirror reflecting broader systemic failures in how we protect vulnerable children. Consider the statistics. Thousands of children die from abuse each year in the United States. Many of these deaths involve caregivers with previous histories of violence. The pattern seen in Emmanuel's case: warning signs ignored, supervision inadequate, intervention too late, repeats across the country. Child protection agencies are often overwhelmed, underfunded, and operating with incomplete information. Criminal justice systems sometimes fail to adequately monitor convicted offenders. Mental health services may be unavailable to families in crisis. These aren't excuses, they're explanations for how cases like Emmanuel's can occur. But understanding the systemic problems doesn't diminish the responsibility of individuals who choose to harm children. As this story continues to unfold, the search for Emmanuel's remains ongoing. Investigators are following up on tips, analyzing evidence, and working to locate his body. Until he is found, there can be no complete resolution to this case. The legal proceedings will likely take months or years to complete. Rebecca and Jake Haro face potential life sentences if convicted of first-degree murder. The evidence presented at trial may finally reveal the full truth about what happened to Emmanuel. For the community of Cabazon and Yucaipa, healing will be a long process. Trust has been shattered. Neighbors are questioning what they thought they knew about the family next door. Parents are holding their children a little tighter, wondering how they can better protect them from dangers that may exist within seemingly ordinary homes. What can we learn from Emmanuel's story? First, that child abuse often happens behind closed doors, perpetrated by people who appear normal to their neighbors and community. Warning signs may be subtle or hidden entirely. Second, that our child protection systems are imperfect and sometimes fail catastrophically. But these failures don't excuse individual responsibility. Adults who choose to harm children bear full moral and legal responsibility for their actions. Third, that communities play a crucial role in protecting vulnerable children. When something seems wrong, speaking up matters. Reporting suspicious behavior to authorities can save lives. Finally, that every child deserves safety, love, and protection. Emmanuel Haro was only 7 months old when his life was cut short. He never had the chance to take his first steps, speak his first words, or experience the joy of childhood. His memory deserves justice. Today, months after Emmanuel was first reported missing, his body remains unfound. This absence creates a haunting uncertainty that permeates every aspect of the case. Without physical evidence, questions linger. Without closure, healing remains incomplete. Investigators continue working leads and following tips. They believe they know where Emmanuel's remains are located, but searches have been unsuccessful. The terrain around Riverside County is vast and unforgiving, desert landscapes, where evidence can remain hidden indefinitely. For Emmanuel's extended family members who may have had no knowledge of the abuse, the uncertainty is particularly cruel. They cannot properly mourn or lay Emmanuel to rest. They cannot visit a grave or have a place to remember him. Their grief exists in a painful limbo. The community continues to hope that Emmanuel will eventually be found. Local volunteers still organize searches. Tips still come into law enforcement. Social media groups dedicated to the case remain active, sharing information and keeping Emmanuel's memory alive. The Emmanuel Haro case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about child protection in America. A 7-month-old baby died allegedly at the hands of people who should have loved and protected him. Multiple systems failed to prevent this tragedy despite clear warning signs. Jake Haro's 2018 child abuse conviction should have been a permanent barrier to unsupervised contact with children. His 2020 weapons charge should have escalated monitoring and intervention. The combination of these factors should have triggered intensive oversight from Child Protective Services. Instead, Emmanuel was allegedly subjected to prolonged abuse that ultimately killed him. His death was then concealed through an elaborate deception that wasted precious investigative resources and traumatized an entire community. The adults responsible for Emmanuel's care made choices that allegedly led to his death, and definitely led to a massive deception that manipulated public sympathy. They turned their community into unwitting accomplices in a cover-up, exploiting people's natural desire to help find a missing child. But this case also demonstrates the power of thorough investigation and community solidarity. Detectives didn't accept Rebecca's story at face value. They followed evidence wherever it led, even when it pointed to the unthinkable conclusion that parents had killed their own child. The community, once they learned the truth, channeled their grief and anger into demands for justice and systemic reform. They refused to let Emmanuel be forgotten or his death be meaningless. As we wait for the legal system to run its course, Emmanuel's story serves as both tragedy and warning. It reminds us that child abuse often hides behind closed doors and ordinary facades. It shows us how systems designed to protect children can fail catastrophically when warning signs are ignored. Most importantly, it honors the memory of a 7-month-old baby who deserved so much better than the life and death he received. Emmanuel Haro's name should be remembered not just as a victim, but as a call to action for better protection of vulnerable children everywhere. Until Emmanuel's body is found and justice is fully served, his story remains unfinished. But his brief life has already sparked conversations about child protection reform that may help prevent future tragedies. That may be Emmanuel's most important legacy, that his death, while tragic and senseless, leads to changes that save other children's lives. In a case filled with darkness, the possibility offers a small light of hope for the future. The truth behind Emmanuel Haro's disappearance has been revealed. There was no kidnapping, no stranger danger, no random crime. There was only a 7-month-old baby who died allegedly at the hands of those who should have protected him, and a desperate attempt to cover up that unthinkable crime. Justice for Emmanuel may still be coming, but for now, his story stands as a stark reminder of how tragically wrong things can go when systems fail, and adults prioritize their own interests over a child's safety and life. What do you think could have prevented this tragedy? Should convicted child abusers ever have unsupervised access to children? How can communities better identify and report suspected abuse? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this case affected you the way it affected me, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. We'll continue following this story as it develops and covering other cases that demand our attention and action. Remember, protecting children is everyone's responsibility. If you suspect a child is being abused, don't hesitate to report it to local authorities or call the Child Help National Child Abuse hotline at 1-800-424-453. Emmanuel Haro deserved better. Every child deserves better, and it's up to all of us to make sure they get it.